Hey,
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the host of the webinar. My name is Kiran Mann, and I have my team with us, Siddhartha, the co-chair webinar, and Brooks, division chair. We represent Human Development and Leadership Division of the American Society of Quality. This is a global division aiming to enrich the personal and professional lives of our members and non-members, the global community, to trump over current and future challenges. We continuously look for new speakers within the range of our body of knowledge, which can be found in our website. We host monthly webinars. If you are interested or know someone interested, we would be happy to review their application. The Book of Knowledge can be found on our website, www.asqhdnl.org. Link is shared on the chat itself at the bottom. Before we begin the webinar, let me go over the housekeeping and some webinar rules. If there is any question, please type under questions section and we will answer their questions. Webinars will be held for 45 minutes and then QA in 15 minutes. If you want continuing education credit, point 1 CEU, you have to be on the webinar for at least 40 minutes. You will receive a dedicated email from us, which you can save as PDF and then to send it to ASQ to claim your credit. Now, let me introduce you the speaker of the day, Rick Denley, a sales and a leadership executive who combines strong mentoring skills along with coaching tactics with real-world knowledge and experience to assess required organizational change that facilitates growth. Rick is now making use of his 25 years experience in team building as an advisor to organizations looking to break through growth ceilings, sales coaching to maximize individual and team results, creating and implementing transformational sales growth strategies, leadership facilitating. He's with Crestcom International and coaching. With his first writings being published in Dynamo Diaries Where To, Rick continues to engage audience with several keynote speeches on leadership, leadership your way, selling in today's marketplace, evolution of the customer, motivation, raising your game. Rick lives in Toronto and has two adult sons whom he coached in his competitive hockey for many years, with them reaching the ranks of university and junior A levels of competition. An advisor, a speaker, a writer, a mentor, leader, and a coach. Rick Denley. Rick, screen is all yours.
thank you, Kieran. And once again, good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Today's topic involves 10 ways to increase morale and motivation, something that we all can be doing in a great realm as good leaders. So please have a piece of paper ready to take some notes and a few questions and answers that we'll put in place for you during the seminar, and I look forward to your questions at the end. The greatest thing you can do for an employee is to give them an opportunity to make both money and meaning, not one or the other. It's our job as leaders to create an environment where it's easy for people to choose to be motivated. During today's session, we'll have a look and review what morale means and how to build it. We'll look at the impact of reward and recognition, how they differ, and how each one can be implemented in your workplace, in your teams, and in your entire organizations. We'll look at 10 ways leaders can motivate, and you can choose for those. And at the end, we'll put together an action plan for success. You'll leave this session with something you can implement in the workplace immediately. I'd like to have a session opener with you today. And the question is, would you rather? So on your own here, think about these different tasks, these roles, these jobs. And let me ask you, if each were to pay the same for a day of work, what would be the first one? What would be your first choice that you would like to do? Think about that and even make note of it now. Secondly, what would be your last choice? What would be the last thing that you would ever want to do if you had to do it for an entire day of work? Think about that. And so from this list then, I'd like you to focus now on that last choice, the task you would least like to do for a day. What if we were to actually pay you triple the amount to do it for a certain period of time? Let me ask you now, and this is going to be a poll that you'll be able to answer here on the webinar. Is that something you would do? Would you actually go in and do that for a day, even if I paid you more than any of the other roles?
We've launched the poll. You guys can select yes or no. And we'll close it as soon as we see most of the respondents responding. Good. We have 76 people, 80 people, 80% voted.
Good, and what are the results of that?
So the results of 82%, 84%, it keeps going. Everybody is voting. It's kind of almost equal. 47% say yes, 53% say no.
Okay, so no, so not necessarily, right? And that's important to us going forward.
We'll share so they can see. Yes, so it's on the screen now.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move ahead, and Karen, I'm actually not going to do the second poll. I'm going to move past that now with the results that we have. And what's interesting here to note is that we wouldn't necessarily go ahead and do a job regardless of the pay. We need to understand that pay, despite what people may say, is not the main motivator for people in work. In fact, it's number 7 on the list of why people work at the places that they do. So we need to keep this in mind. Fast Company tells us here in a quote that worker happiness has fallen every year in good economic times and bad. That there are 2 things about employee motivation that everyone agrees on. It's good when employees have it and not so good when they don't. Did you know that 71% of workers are not engaged or actively are disengaged from their work? 71%, almost 3/4 are not fully engaged because of lack of motivation. And today, over half of workers effectively hate their jobs, and that's a very strong statement. Not one that as a business leader or owner wants to have in place. Employees feel overworked, under-rewarded, and greatly unappreciated. That's not what we want of our staff. So why is all this a concern? Well, remember that as leaders, one of the most important things we do is attract and retain top talent. We spend a tremendous amount of our time, energy, and money trying to bring on board the top people in our industry from other industries, and then making sure that we keep them. And that while we keep them, they're working 100% in a very motivated way. In fact, top talent want to work in an environment that embodies positive morale and really motivates them. And they want that on a daily basis. We all do. So the learning goals for this module, number 1, are to understand the impact of workplace morale and how to influence it positively. We also want to identify the nature of motivation and a leader's role in providing it. And then finally, for the third one, we want to learn 10 techniques to increase motivation and morale. So let's define these to start with. Let's go to the bare roots of what morale is defined as. It's the mental and emotional condition, okay, as of enthusiasm, confidence, loyalty of an individual or group with regard to the function or tasks at hand. For instance, a team's morale is high. So we need to look at morale boosters. And what are these, and how do we use them effectively? This is certainly not a good way to boost morale. And I hope that you got a little chuckle out of this, because there are some organizations still out there that think this might be the right approach, and that's not what we do. So for morale boosters, I'd like a little self-assessment for you now. Give some thought to how you as a leader do these things. As a leader, do you personalize to the individual when you think about morale and motivation? Do you help define the expected outcomes for them? Do you clarify what those expectations are and explain the reasons why? Do we create a really good place to work because of this? Do we utilize recognition and reward in building morale to keep people motivated? Do we remove barriers that demotivate people so that they can get the job done that they want to do? People want to succeed at the task at hand. And do we model the behavior we expect? Walking the talk is extremely important as a leader. And do we mentor others, our middle management, high performers that we want to bring through the organization to lead others? Are we mentoring them correctly? And are we motivated ourselves? These are issues that we'll be looking at going forward. So recognition and reward, they're similar, yeah, but they do have their differences. Looking at recognition, it's an appreciation, right, of an achievement, a service, or some ability that somebody's put forth. For instance, the intern worker was recognized for their creative implementation of new ideas. That's recognizing somebody for something that they're achieving or doing. To go a step further, we need to look at involved recognitions. It's not enough to give recognition. When we give recognition, we want to be sure we're including other aspects. We want to be sure that we include what was done that deserved the recognition and how did they go about doing it. For whom was it done? Was it a customer? Was it internal? Was it external? And why was it done? And how did we benefit? And when we say we, it could be internally as a team, an individual, certainly the organization. Because by recognizing this, we're recognizing the behaviors that we want to see in others. And that's why we recognize it in a very public forum whenever possible. Now let's look at rewards. The definition of rewards is really more of a gift or something of value that gets handed over to somebody for an achievement. Sales is a typical example. The salesperson that made quota was rewarded with a cash bonus. In the past, it could be other ways. It could be trinkets. It could be President's Club trips, which is a reward. The recognition's built in, but the reward is something which is very tangible, something that's handed over. So if we want the reward to drive the right behaviors, there are some key points that we have to share here too. What are the behaviors that led to the desired results so that others can join in? And that creates a culture of people that recognize and reward and then want to get involved and mimic that. And what you'll find is that other successes will happen for people and divisions within an organization. And we have to be sure how these goals tied together to the overall company goals. What was it that fed upstream to the company goals? Because we want everybody's behavior to lead to company goals being successful. And the rewards of the individual desires. And are these rewards open-ended? Or do they stop at some point, which would discourage somebody from putting in a continuous above board type of effort so that they gain the reward? We don't want those to be closed or have a ceiling on them. So keep that in mind when you're building rewards to help motivate people. Keep them open-ended. So motivation, really, it's our job as leaders, right, to create an environment where it's easy for people to choose to be motivated. I understand. People should come to their workplace every day motivated, ready to go, but it doesn't always work that way. In fact, if we create a workplace of motivation, they'll come in that way. It's almost in reverse to start with. So that's our job as leaders. So if having motivated employees is what management wants, and if being motivated is what employees want, why isn't this happening all the time? There are some reasons for that. And we're going to look at how we can counter them. And what I'd like to do with you now is really share. Share ways that we will be motivating and building the morale of others going forward. Motivation is about getting people to do what needs to be done because they want to do it. There are 5 general reasons why people don't do what they're supposed to do. The first reason is that people don't know what to do. And this is a communication issue that we need to look at and solve. And communication is extremely important. And as much as we think we communicate well, we need to communicate, re-communicate, and then ask back what we communicated to be sure people understand. The second reason why people don't do what they're supposed to do is that people don't know how to do something. And that's a training issue. Many organizations don't have a formal onboarding process and a training process to bring new recruits and others into a role so that they understand how to do it. The third reason why people don't do what they're supposed to do is that they don't know why they should be doing it. This is a motivation issue. People need compelling reasons that make sense to them. It's not enough to say, well, because I told you to. Leaders must make time to clearly explain the reasons why something needs to be done. Reason number 4 why people don't do what they're supposed to do is that they can't do the task. This is an ability issue because they lack the required skills. Leadership is no different, and that's why we're here today. We're sharpening our saw so that we can get better at being leaders. And that's what we want to do on a regular basis, is become better, and so do our staff. Reason number 5 is that people won't do what needs to be done. This is an insubordination issue and is the most serious of the 5 reasons and needs to be dealt with aside. Now, let's have a look at 10 ways to motivate and increase morale. That's really why we're here today, is to get some of these golden nuggets so that we can do this on our own. Because motivation is about getting people to do what needs to be done because they want to do it. That's the best way. So the first method is to personalize the motivation to the individual. We have to do the hard work of finding out what motivates the people we lead. What really motivates people going forward? The 3 questions that leaders can ask to personalize motivation are: what is your greatest hope at work? What is your greatest fear? Let's unravel that one as well. And then finally, what would you most like to learn? Learnings are ongoing. People are craving more information so they can be better at their jobs and maybe progress their careers. But if we don't ask them, if we assume that it's similar to what ours are or other people's, that's wrong. This is how we would personalize it. So the second motivational method is to define the outcomes. Especially in difficult times, people are very aware of what they are trying to avoid, but what they're less clear on is what they're trying to achieve. To clarify outcomes to be achieved, leaders must explain what, why, how well, and by when. We need to explain all of these to them to clarify those issues. And speaking of that, we need to clarify expectations. There are 3 levels of expectations that leaders need to have of people. Minimum expectations are the minimum levels of performance required to keep the job. That's not where we want to be, and people don't want to be there either. Desired expectations are the levels of performance the employee is capable of performing now. Potential expectations answer the question, how good could you be? And what are the steps to get you there? Fourthly, we want to explain the reasons why. Okay, to explain the reason why, this is called the motivational why. People have a natural desire to understand why they're being asked to do complex activities. One of the big problems for management today is that they have reasons for doing something that makes sense to them, but not to the employees. So don't be afraid to explain why and get them on board. The 5th motivational method is to create a motivational environment. This is your culture. And what we're building here really is motivational environment where people trust who they work for, enjoy who they work with. That's team building. And where they have pride in what they do. That builds a very motivational culture. We also talked briefly about reward and recognition. Recognition is usually that intangible effort, telling somebody what they did a good job at, while reward is really a tangible, and it involves giving an employee something to reinforce something they did. People desire to be noticed and known. Interestingly enough, not everybody likes both. Some people would just prefer the reward without the recognition. Others thrive on recognition and want that spotlight. This takes us back to really understanding and personalizing the motivational factors for someone. And we need to discover those like we discussed in point 1. The 7th method here is to remove barriers. Leaders need to ask employees, what keeps you from doing better work? What keeps you from being able to do your job the best that you can? Those small things, like a stone in your shoe over time, wear on you, and they just nag away at you, and they don't allow you to be the best that you can be. If we remove that stone, if we remove those barriers, once we've identified them, you're going to have a much more motivated and enthusiastic employee. Now remember too, we have to model the behavior that we expect. Leaders can't forget the power of their own example. An important motivation principle is that everything that leaders do promotes or pollutes. Promotes or pollutes. There's no neutrality in leadership. We're either promoting the right behavior or we're demonstrating the wrong behavior. Be on the right side of demonstrating this. And that falls into mentoring as well. This allows a leader to know an employee better. So motivational can be personalized correctly. Mentorship is something that we grow into over time, and it's expected from our staff that we be able to mentor some of them that want to grow their careers as well. And finally, call this one motivating yourself. The 2 primary reasons why leaders burn out or are not motivated are, firstly, they're not doing what they enjoy or that they're good at. You can't last in that environment, neither can your staff. And secondly, they're not working with people they respect and enjoy working with. People that they respect and enjoy working with is very important for leaders and staff. The hard truth here, people who are unable to motivate themselves must be content with mediocrity, no matter how impressive their other talents. So we need to self-motivate so that we can motivate others that come up through. And the others that can self-motivate are the ones that will turn into some of the best leaders. On days when workers have the sense they're making headway in their jobs, or when they receive support from others to overcome obstacles, their emotions are most positive and their drive to succeed at its peak. And that's what we're shooting for here. That's so very, very important to us. And I want to share with you a couple of methods as well for this. And keep in mind, firstly, you can create all different ways to motivate staff, but they have to be your own. Okay, you're your own type of leader, so look for ways to motivate. When I went in and was consulting with an inside sales team, mainly made up of millennials, we needed a way to bring the team together, motivate them quickly, first thing in the morning, to bring everybody together. So we went with the tactic of 9-minute meetings. We held them at 9 a.m. We brought all the staff in. It was a stand-up meeting for only 9 minutes. The objective of the meeting was to really share what went well yesterday, the week before, past successes, and even some challenges that maybe others could help with, so that we remove those barriers as a team. Remember, working with different generations, we need to adjust how we work with them, and the millennial generation loves to work collaboratively. So in working collaboratively, we solve ideas together. We remove barriers together. Removing barriers, like removing that stone in your shoe, allows you to stride and move much quicker and accomplish more without pain. And then, of course, you're going to be a happier worker who is more motivated going forward. The other thing it did at 9-minute meetings is make sure everybody arrived at the same time, ready to go, not wandering in at different times throughout the morning. And that helps motivate people as well, that the team is fully on board, ready to go. It's not a lot different than a warm-up in a sporting event. The team's all there, dressed, ready to go, and they warm up so that they can hit the field or the ice ready to go immediately, just as you want your staff to do at work. Second thing you could do is something creative for people that breaks up the day. Don't hold meetings in boardrooms. Now that the weather's getting nicer, get out and do some walk and talks. Bring that team along. And the first part of the walk and talk, let them discuss whatever they like. And that generates some real positive feelings. And then move that out of the way. And on the walk back, have them share ideas that are being generated to help with issues or problems. Again, working extremely collaboratively is very important. And I'm sure you have other ways as well to help motivate. So there's some ideas to start with. So here's what I'd like you to do based on some of the things that we've discussed right now. As we say with leaders, success is in your hand. And here's a SMART action plan format for us. Based on things that we've talked about, we want to try and create a SMART goal. And a reminder for you that when we talk about SMART goals as leaders, is that they need to be specific to what we're talking about. Somehow need to be measurable so that we know if we move the needle in the right direction. They need to be obtainable, not out of reach. These are not BHAGs. These are not the big audacious type goals. These are ones that are obtainable. You want them very relevant. How do they contribute to your division, your company's overall goals? And we need them to be timely. We need to put a timeline on them so that we know when we need to complete them by. As we know, there's nothing like a deadline to drive activity. So give some thought to the best idea that you may want to take back and implement. And let's see how we motivate. Here's what we can do. Let's identify an individual that could be performing at a higher level. And choose the reasons first why they're not motivated. Remember, we spoke about the main reasons. They don't know what to do. Maybe they don't know how to do it. Maybe they don't know why they're doing it. The why is very important to people. Maybe they can't actually do the task. And if they won't do the task, that's another issue, as we mentioned, that needs to be addressed. But out of the first four, figure out what it is. And you'll have to have a conversation with that individual in a positive way to try and turn their motivation around and identify it individually. So identify the top 3 motivational methods that you think will apply. Apply them to this individual. And this will allow you to start to understand how this methodology works to motivate people in the workplace. Following this, you'll be able to expand it to divisions, teams, even the overall organization. I've been working with a team in a small company down in the Windsor area, and what we identified was that the staff really didn't know why they were doing what they were doing. They were enthusiastic, but maybe not as motivated as they could be. When we broke it down and explained to them the positive impact that their role and their tasks have every day and how it contributes, then they understood the why. Once they understood the why, the motivation of the entire team picked up. And remember too that this is ongoing, not something that you do once. This needs to be done on a regular basis to make sure that you're communicating the right information to the staff to keep them motivated. So now that you're creating this game plan for you, this action plan, remember too to put a time frame in place to get this done. When will you begin it? When will you complete it by? And what will it look like? Now go execute. As leaders, we need to execute. Take small things and accomplish them. Tick some boxes that help your staff become more motivated, involved in the organization, and even become more leaderish themselves. We want them to become better leaders. That's why we're doing this as well. It's one of the best things we can do as leaders is create more leaders. So if you're looking for some more information on this specific topic, here are some suggested readings. Diana Podmoroff talks about 365 ways to motivate and reward your staff every day with little or no money. Well, that sounds pretty good, so you may want to pick up that book, as well as Leadership and Motivation. There's a real interesting concept that John Adair talks about here, the 55th rule and the 8 key principles of motivating others. It's a very influential book, and it's one definitely worth a read. So I'll leave those up there for a minute if you want to take a snapshot of them. Good. Now, the organization that Karen introduced me from, I am an authorized facilitator for CrestCom. CrestCom's a world-renowned facility that looks after training for organizations and individuals. We work with good people to really develop them into great leaders. We have a program, which this module on morale and motivation came from, and it's a 12-month program, which is called Bulletproof Leadership. And within that, what we look to do is train people to become the best leaders that they can possibly be. And there's a few core areas that we talk about, including how to connect, to really promote understandings and collaboration, how to deliver set strategic plans and properties within organizations, and how to inspire, how to connect, create a shared vision of leadership and diversity, how to transform, managing leads, changing opportunities, and really cultivating learnings and growth of a company, and how to do it with integrity, how to lead with integrity and model the integrity that you want to see in your organization through self-awareness, and encourage constructive feedback from an organization going forward. These modules are done in monthly training. There are action plans, just as we formulated briefly at the end of our discussion here. They're followed by monthly debriefs to see how the action plan was actually put in place and implemented for results. It's a full circle training on all the different modules that we talk about. So I hope that you enjoyed this session. Really looking for your feedback on this. It's one module of many that we talk about on how to motivate and lead staff and organizations as well. My information's at the bottom of the screen, but I know we want to open it up now to any questions or comments that you have. Maybe you have some ways that you've found successful to motivate your staff too. And we're looking forward to those now. Karen?
Thank you, Rick. It's Rita here. This was a wonderful presentation, and I think pretty much many people and many of us as well relate to the topic. We have opened the questions section, so there is a question section on the chat box that you can use to ask your questions. And we already have one, and that's Nancy, and kind of relates to what I was about to ask as well. So how do you motivate when you have a team who might be observing another team who you don't have control over, that they're not working hard or not being accountable for what they're supposed to take action into? And basically, controllable versus uncontrollable might be a cultural thing or a structure, wider company structure, that you can't really have a straightforward impact.
Okay, that's a very good question, Nancy. Thank you for asking that. Definitely, when you have divisions that are close to each other and they're run differently, it can be a challenge. You know, there's two ways to approach this. The first thing is really to make sure that your team does understand the importance of the work that they're doing. Go back to the things that we talked about so that they really do understand, okay, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how it impacts positively on the company. We also want to go back and be sure that you are putting in place a recognition and reward that will keep them moving forward. Maybe they need that carrot dangled in front of them in the form of a reward as well, so that they put blinders on to what others are doing and stay focused on their task at hand. We don't want to get drawn down by other divisions or individuals that aren't performing at their peak. Try and keep that team very much focused on the goals at hand and remind them on a regular basis. I hope that helps out.
Thanks, Rick. Another one which kind of falls to why people are not interested, kind of thing. So I had that ask, what would you do if people are uninterested in your team, and what can we do to make improvements to our work? I guess that
Right.
would be a question of why they're uninterested.
You're right. I would agree with that. You do want to find out on a personal level why they're disinterested. Maybe they're not in the right place within the organization. Remember, Jim Collins talks in his book, Good to Great, about getting good people on the bus going in the same direction. That's step one. The second, more challenging part of that is finding the right seat for them. Maybe they're not in the right place. Maybe the work that they're doing no longer motivates them and they need a change. Again, this is very personal. And we have to get down to the individual level so that we understand what will motivate that person and how we put them in the right spot.
I absolutely agree. We have had examples where people were doing the same sort of job in two people, but one of was more social and wanted to interact, so we could put that person maybe dealing more with customer calls, and another person who's more into data or screen focused would be processing shipments we have. So that's
a good
kind of
point.
more personal personality view.
One of the first things that you might want to do, correct, is to look into their personality styles and do some testing, so that you fully understand what type of job or work will actually mesh best with their personality. When you find the right fit for somebody's personality and work, they'll become more motivated and much more happy as well.
I'm curious to hear, because I've heard about the personality questionnaires that are out there. You because you have the consulting role, did you feel any reluctance from the companies to allow you to do that personality testing?
No, not usually, especially if you make sure the reasons for it, that you're helping them figure out where they fit within the organization the best, as well as where they'll enjoy working the best. So it's really a win-win for everybody at the end of the day. And there's many different good organizations out there that can help with this type of personality testing. You'll find as well that personality testing now is done up front, even in the interview process. When you've shortlisted some strong candidates, you'll want to look into the personality testing to see, do they fit the team? Do they fit the overall culture within the organization? We know that they're good at what they do. That's why they're in front of you. But how do they fit within the team? That can become very important.
And then I think we as employees as well have to remember that's a two-way thing. Every time you want to work for a company, you try, especially it's important you understand the quality, culture, or whatever they have going on internal, which is not written down, and see if that's the fit and if you want to be in there as well. So it's like a two-way situation.
That's the key word that you mentioned, it's fit. We know that we hire the right people with the abilities in most cases. It's how do they fit within the culture that we're trying to build and the existing people there.
And we have another question when it comes to mergers. So Denholm is asking about, Kendall is asking about how do we motivate if you are doing a merger, which is that results in layoffs, and that's kind of tricky situation there.
It is, and it's a difficult one to answer right now, right here, when you're looking at that. If you do need to look at layoffs and things within staff, it's something that needs to be done professionally, properly, and as quickly as possible as well. Once it's done, though, you can get back to these 10 ways to help motivate. One of the things you'll want to do following that type of situation is be sure that you're creating and communicating very clear goals going forward. Get the team on board with them by having them be part of that planning process, so that they're also involved in the goals that are being set, so that they are, like we said, SMART goals, and that they're achievable and they feel that they've contributed to them. Build and make sure that you motivate the team that's remaining and move forward.
Absolutely agreed. We were chatting before the call about the inclusion piece of it, which is always a key to make people feel involved and go with the change of smoother. Another question from Henry is, now when you deal with people, and it happens to me all the time because I don't work with just one department, it's cross-functional work, what do you do to motivate individuals basically that don't report to you directly? Would you involve their leaders, or do you use some I don't know, informal leadership there?
Right,
What would you do
right.
for that?
That's a very good question, and it does happen. And it goes back to the first question from Nancy here. You know, when there is another division that maybe isn't being motivated the same by their leader, and it can be a tricky situation. And since these people don't directly report to you, I worked for a tremendous gentleman when I was with the Emerson Corporation for years, Larry Barrett. And Larry really looked after Canada as a whole, but we reported as GMs to different places in the world for those divisions. So Larry once told me he leads by moral suasion. And I asked him what he meant by that. He said, well, nobody really reports to me here, but I lead through moral suasion. I get people to understand the reasons why we do the things that we do, and that helps motivate them and get them involved in it. And whenever possible, like we discussed earlier, try and have goals that are cross-divisional. Don't have them only within silos. If you have some goals that different divisions need to work on, that breaks down the barriers. It gets rid of some of the hierarchy as well and allows people to work with others without feeling like they're stepping on another person's toes, a different leader's toes. And that way you can merge into working together towards common goals. That'll help break down some of the barriers and motivate people in all different divisions and departments.
I love the word terminology used. I usually say I persuade, but I'm not like being tricked or anything like that. So it's kind of keeping, sticking with your values and principles of the mission of the company as well. But still, somehow psychology always comes handy there.
Correct.
Brian is asking, what are your thoughts about the classic performance improvement plan and how effective it is in today's environment? Well, I don't know what he means. I do know that the ASU model that they make one.
Is this Brian
come
who
with
asked the question?
Yes.
Great, Brian. Good question, and thank you. I'll tell you my opinion on it. I would throw out annual reviews that you sit down and do them formally and do them on an ongoing ad hoc.
I'm sorry, I want to explain. Performance improvement plan.
Yeah, performance improvement plans. It needs to be ongoing. First thing we look at with performance improvement plans are to make sure that they're very relevant to the individual and the division. And the timing of them is something that I want to speak to. Don't sit down and do them formally every year. Have them on a regular basis. Have them on an ongoing basis, and they get upgraded as the person moves past some of the things and ticks the boxes. They don't have to wait another 6 months to get another type of review. Ongoing learnings and improvement need to happen just that way, ongoing, not just on a calendar basis. So keep them going forward on a regular basis.
Absolutely great. And as I keep going on to leadership, to me, leadership, it's also the followership as well. There is a lot that the followers can do. And personally, I do ask for performance review feedback myself without having to wait for the annual one. So I think there is a lot that people can do as well and take accountability on that. Another question, and we have kind of many here, so I'm glad to see those. So hopefully we'll try to cover them. So Louise is asking, would you use motivation with bottom line employees when upper management is not motivated? And that goes back to bigger structure impact that you might not have directly.
That can be a concern, definitely. And getting the upper crust involved as well and motivated is a difficult task. We know that managing up is one of the most difficult things that we will do. But again, if you can create different environments and cultures that involve everybody, from the ground floor right up through to the C-suite, where everybody is involved in common goals, common activities. I mentioned simple things like 9-minute meetings, and I would often introduce others from the organization to come in and just talk about what they do and what their goals are to break down barriers. And that way as well, other people can get motivated in what you're doing. You need to go ahead and consistently do the right things, the right time, in the right fashion, lead by example, and pull others in and explain to them why this is important. And I know that's difficult when you report upwards to this individual or people, but if it is important to the company and the culture and attracting and retaining top talent that are effectively working within the organization to reach all the goals, we need to share that with everybody in the organization.
Exactly. And I would add to that, I work most of the time with upwards, so it's tough. But I think if you try to understand what as you mentioned, the organizational goals are, and see what you're doing, what we're trying to improve, it's
Right.
fit
That's a good
on
point.
the major goals related,
Share with them.
explained on their language. Might be a
Well, yeah, and
finance
share
number
with them
that you
the
want to
importance.
hear, but
Yeah, you're right. Share with them the importance, not just to the organization, but yourself. How important is this? Sometimes bringing it down to a personal level has a lot of impact, so that the individuals realize, yeah, you know what? I want to be successful at this. It's what you hired me to do. I need your support in doing this.
And going back to feedback, which at some point you have to use, we had a whole webinar on feedback, but it's saying, Jim asking, how would that kill or raise motivation, which is quite a large topic in there, but if we can cover a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was Jim's question? How to?
The question is, how would we use feedback in terms of increasing motivation, because it can always decrease it as well, depending on how you provide feedback.
Yeah, and not to take away from your previous webinar that you had on that, certainly we need to keep in mind that feedback, we want to make sure that the type of feedback we give is very candid, timely, and as well, in some ways positive, but also, like I said, candid, so that they understand. People will come and ask, even after I present things, and say, geez, you know what, would you like some constructive criticism? And I'll say, no, I don't. Because constructive means you're building me up, right? And then criticism means you're tearing them down. If you'd like to give feedback, I'm more than open. And that's what we need to do as leaders as well, is give feedback, give proper feedback. And no different than you do in sports with kids and others. Yeah, point out a couple of things that went well, but also point out areas for improvement. That's why people seek feedback, so that they can improve and get better.
And adding to that, as you mentioned, you have to ask, and you have to ask if they want it to begin with. So maybe they don't want it at that time, and find the right time when to give that feedback, so they're open and accepting that feedback.
Yeah, very good. They have to be in the right state of mind to receive the feedback properly.
Nasha is asking how motivation can transform competitive employees to cooperate with one another.
That's a good question. When you're looking to motivate people in a cooperative fashion, I'd mentioned earlier, look for common goals. Look for goals that they need to achieve together. Very often when I set up compensation structures for organizations, divisions, what we did was set it up with both individual goals and reward, and team goals and rewards. This will force people to work together. You don't want one or the other, because it can drive them apart. But common goals will help bring teams together, and they'll have to learn to work together.
And I agree. The rewarding itself can be based on the goals of the group itself.
Correct.
And my favorite question here, which is, as I mentioned before, leadership and fellowship. So we have Roland from Ireland, which we thank him for joining us. Some people from Europe. I'm European, so yay to Europe.
Wonderful.
How do I motivate my boss to become a leader? So again, managing up and the fellowship there.
How do we motivate our bosses to become better leaders? Send them to CrestCom Learning. That would be one thing when they go through this. Certainly, again, anytime you can do things together. I put many people through CrestCom Learning myself, both the Bulletproof Manager course, which this module is from, as well as a sales course. I did it with them. So that we came out with the same knowledge, the same language, and that really helped as well. The other thing, again, is selling. You have to sell this individual on why it's important that they become a stronger leader, and the impact it'll have on the organization, maybe even the impact it'll have on them personally. That may help them.
And personally, what has helped me is really asking, how can I help you? Like, I feel like when people love to help, if we really think about it, and love to be asked for help. So if you are, even though you might not really want to help because you feel like this is not a leader, why I'm working for him, But if you just approach him on a personal level like that, I think, and build some sort of friendship relationship. Like to me, like if there is no friendship relationship, it's really tough to work every day with the person. So you might want to take out your defensiveness and open that path for the person as well.
Dita, that's a wonderful question to ask. It's nice and open-ended. It's not threatening at all. It's just, listen, how can I help? What is it I can do to help you?
Mm-hmm. And we have Jason asking, how do you motivate a team when you are on a project? You are a project manager with time constraints, and you know how it goes. Who doesn't have direct authority on how the team members are awarded, or that's kind of my case, or how they are trained, on how they are treated in respective divisions. We kind of covered this a little bit.
We did a little bit as well. You know, sometimes you just need to lead by example. Sometimes we don't have the influence over others in the way that we would like to, but leading by example can be very powerful. You get out front and lead, and you do things the way that need to be done. Others will buy in over time. They want to be part of a winning team. And when somebody's being successful and you emphasize the correct behaviors by doing them yourself, that will impact them positively, and you'll see them come on board.
Yeah, and in the long term, in the short term, what I've used is really like advocates. I would pick the right people in that moment. Like some people are really inner motivated, so it's very easy to identify them and work with them. And as the synergy gets created, as you mentioned, they will come and have buy-in with time.
Right, absolutely.
We have George asking, how do you manage when there is some math or science required and you have people not having the basic knowledge? Oh, I've used the cartoons to explain statistics for quality, so I don't know if that helps. But I've shared chocolates.
Yeah, no, George, it's good. Listen, if people don't have the skill set, we did talk about that as being one of the reasons or barriers to them doing the job and being successful in it and being motivated. So it could be a training issue. Get the training in place that brings the people's knowledge and skill set to the right level so that they can contribute properly. Look into what needs to be done to help them.
And hiring issue, I presume, but you joined the company now. I guess that was part of the initial question, is the same person. And if I didn't understand, George, please resend any question you have. Eric has recognition and rewards, individuals versus groups. Any recommendation in one versus the other? And do you approach them differently when you try to use one or the other?
Well, good question. And again, we have to ask questions. If we're going to satisfy the staff and teams correctly, we have to know what they prefer. Do they prefer recognition or reward? And that might be on an individual level as well as a team level. Like I mentioned, the new generation coming along that are decision makers in the industries now for us is definitely working with millennials, and they like to do things collaboratively, so they may prefer a team approach. If it is very specific to a sales organization, it might be more individual, and then you have to realize, are they looking for reward or recognition? Dig in, understand the team and the individuals, then you can supply the right solution for them.
And thanks, Eric, for that question. Louise is asking, which personality testing do you prefer? Any preferred there? BM, DISC is mentioning here.
You know what? There's a lot out there, from Myers-Briggs to other ones, that you can look into and utilize. I've worked with an organization in the past which is called Altitude. A good friend of mine, Jim Thompson. So if you want to go to www.altitudehcm, henrycharlesmary.com. So altitudehcm.com. That's a great group to work with there, and they have different testing, which will help make sure that your staff fit correctly within the role and the organization. So feel free to go to them. They work great together.
And another question from Nashua is, if the organization doesn't pay much attention or putting attention to who's talented, is there anything those employees can do in order to emphasize on the value of the employee motivation?
So you're looking for the staff to step up and ask for this?
Yes, yes.
Definitely, definitely. And if you've created a culture where people contribute and have a voice within it, they should feel free to do that. That would be extremely important. And they can come up with something, even a template, and say, you know, we would like to help further the morale and motivation. We feel this would be a good way to do it. And again, the new generation coming along has a strong voice, and we need to listen to it. If these are things that will help them do their jobs better and help the organization, we should be all for that as leaders.
And even in my experience, even really like I'm a person who tends to help a lot everywhere. I'm kind of volunteering sometimes, so I end up doing a lot of work that is way out of what I'm supposed to do. But you can do it, but then if you feel like you are not really, you do it for yourself because it just comes to you. But if you are looking for that recognition, even a reminder on, hey, this is what I'm doing, because I've been working, so whoever you're working for at least sees what you're doing and sees the difference between, I can quickly go back to what I'm supposed to do and that's it, but here's the impact.
Yeah, very much so. Again, you need to take the initiative at times, and that's really being a leader within yourself. And, you know, we don't need to always have a large title to be a leader. We need to just be very enthusiastic and motivated within ourselves to lead.
And then we have Kendall again thanking you. And
well, thank
we have
you.
Ayat. I appreciate that. Ayat is asking, can you use bonus to motivate? Can we use bonus to motivate our staff, or this would be against quality as they will work only because of the money? I've had that sort of HR thing saying we can't get people paid, and I've sent chocolates. Where I said I sent chocolates, I really ship chocolates in an office. But depends what you define by bonus, I would say. I don't know.
Well, of course. The main thing with dealing with bonuses and that is that they're tied to performance that you need to see, that it's available to everybody, and that it's very transparent on how it's applied and to who. That's the ethical portion of it. When it's done correctly in that fashion, there's nothing wrong with it. It can be a great incentive for individuals to rise above and work more in a capable fashion so that they strive to achieve those goals.
Mm-hmm. And somebody is going back to when you mentioned, so we have Donna here saying, when you mentioned that pay is not the main motivator for people, it was number 7. I believe you mentioned what are the rest of the motivators, like what would motivate people?
Well, that's a good question.
Each person there, but
no, a very good question. You know, there's different surveys that you can read about, and it does differ for individuals. I've been able to sample large groups in some presentations and facilitations that I've done, and you'll find differences in both individuals as well as generations in what they're looking for. But certainly some of the things that the individuals are looking for now in an organization is one of the things we mentioned, which is having a voice. They need to have a voice within the organization and the direction it takes in some form. They also like to be sure that the organization is ethical, that the workings that they do and the investments that they have are ethical in many ways, and that could include towards a green environment, that they participate in these type of cultures. Culture is very important for people now to work in a culture which is supportive and is very, I'll say, aware of the importance of the individual mentally and physically and their health as well. So there's several factors that go into it. The other one that most people like to go and work in an organization where it's well led. They're looking for leaders like the people that are on this webinar today that lead in a correct fashion, not an old-fashioned way, but much more modern and collaboratively. So those are some factors that impact where people go, much more than just salary.
Rick, this is Brooks.
Hi, Brooks.
Were you surprised at the number of people who would do the least favorite job for 3 times the money? Was that number much higher than you expected?
It was actually, yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. And it'd be interesting to see if they lasted at it when they start to realize the detrimental impact that doing something you don't enjoy can have on you, can have on your entire life. You can do it for a short period of time, but not too long.
I would expect it to come out 80-20 or 90-10. I was really surprised.
Yeah. Well, what else would you comment on that, Brooke, regarding it? Do you think people would sustain a job that they're not happy in or don't enjoy doing for very long?
Well, they would not be motivated on the job.
I don't know how long that would stay.
So they might, I mean, financial circumstances might keep them there, but they would certainly not be engaged in the work. In other words, the money might motivate them in terms of the choice of job, but it wouldn't motivate them to do the work.
Right. No, I would agree with that too. Good. No, very much so. Nika, I know
Thank
that we're
you.
approaching our hour
Yes,
here.
so
People do
I would
have
like
further
actually to,
questions. I
I would
just
like
wanted
to thank,
they can reach out to me as needed. My website's there, and my email address is just my name at gmail.com. So rickdenley@gmail.com if they'd like to continue to
oh,
reach
that's
out.
nice of you. That's nice of you, Rick. I would actually like to thank even the attendees who asked questions. And before I explain how you can get credit for this webinar, again, thank you, Rick, so much. It was a great session. We did have many people and more than we expected, so we might send
Wonderful.
an email
Thanks to
to
all
everybody
who
else.
attended. Very good.
And
Thanks.
as well as Kieran and Brooks, thanks for helping with the webinar. Today's webinar and recording on the webinar will be posted. We had a couple of questions asked. Will be posted on our website, hopefully within this week. And the recording will be on our YouTube channel. And we will have a next webinar already is out there for May 30, 2 p.m. I'm sorry, the time will be different, but May 30, where Miss Paula Hope will be helping us with understanding 4 phases of a long-term network. Registration can be done already on our website. You can go there and view at our calendar. There is a couple of webinars upcoming there. In order to get notifications, you can also follow us on our LinkedIn page or sign up for our newsletter. And you'll also receive, and we really appreciate if you can fill basically a 1-minute survey, which it will pop up in your screen as soon as you close the webinar, or just follow the link you'll get in the follow-up email within an hour. The survey allows us to improve the quality of the upcoming webinars, and that's how we actually took into consideration what past webinar responses were received by us, and we changed the timing to be during office hours. You get credit for those who has been in the webinar for 40 minutes. That's a 0.1 continuous education credit, which you can basically show to ASU as a proof to claim your credit. The way you get that is you'll receive an email, a separate email, not a follow-up email. You can just save that and use it for claiming the credit to ASU. Again, thank you all for your time today, and we hope to see you in the next webinar. Have a nice day. Bye.